Peel says the union representing Peel paramedics has to admit, and they won't, that their membership makes too much money. We'll talk next on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010. Here's an interesting story out of Mississauga. The union representing Peel paramedics had some harsh words today for a candidate in Mississauga's Ward 2 who said frontline emergency workers in the region make too much money. That candidate in Ward 2 is John Armstrong, who joins me now. John, good morning.
Good morning, Jerry. Thanks for having me on.
Are you sorry you said it?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It came out of a question that was asked to all the candidates. And, just to clarify, I mean, these are tough jobs. Emergency service workers have a really tough job to do, and they deserve to be fairly compensated. But the point that I was making was, there was a statement that came out of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario in mid-August saying literally that the compensation packages, especially the pension plans that are attached to these positions right now, are unsustainable and are going to bankrupt cities unless somebody does something about it.
All right. I would like to point out right now that we invited representation of the union to come on the show as well. Dave Wakely, president of OPSU, declined the opportunity. John Armstrong is a Mississauga Ward 2 candidate. How would you fix that problem? Is it a situation where it's about the pensions? Are the salaries themselves too high? Can we get by with fewer people?
Well, I mean, it's certainly something that has to be bored into much deeper. I mean, the Coles Notes version of the city budget is 600 pages long, and to get the kind of information that you really want out of this is very tough. But at this point, I'm not advocating a reduction in pay or staffing in these positions. But, I'd love to see a wage and hiring freeze until the rest of us taxpayers can kind of catch up and assess sort of where we are with this. And it's not just the emergency services. It's really, all the municipal and regional workers. And again, not just the public service unions, management as well, because most of their compensation packages are tied to the union packages. They've gotten cost of living increases year over year over year, but there's never been any decrease. I was in the newspaper business for a long time, and when things got tough, towards 2007, 2008, there was people that I worked with, including myself, that had significant salary reductions and pay reductions. They haven't seen anything like that, and they're really not living in the same kind of economic reality that most of us are.
You are formerly the advertising manager for Mississauga News?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, John Armstrong is a Mississauga Ward 2 candidate. You're right. There are any number of studies that demonstrate that people who work for the city, the province, the feds, public employees earn for the same job something like 20% more in terms of salary and benefits. And certainly when it comes to retirement, in many cases, people in the private sector who are paying those salaries don't have any kind of retirement program that matches anything close to what public employees have. And yet they do seem unwilling to say, okay, we'll hold the line a little bit and let the rest of you catch up.
Well, that's right. But, they do have a vested interest, and I mean, the unions certainly are trying to act on the best interest of their employees. But it was never set up to be this way. I mean, my father was an advocate of public service, but he had taught us that if you were going to go into public service, your expectations were that you were going to have to work hard. You weren't going to make as much money as you probably could in the private sector, but you would have a higher level of job security and a fairly solid pension when you retired. But it was always an understanding that you were making a sacrifice to go into public service. It wasn't supposed to be the better financial option with the liability for that falling on your fellow taxpayers.
How do you think this is going to play for you politically?
Well, I'm not sure. I live in a fairly conservative riding. Certainly, if any of the comments from the articles that have been written are a basis to go on, it seems like there's a lot of support out there. I mean, even people that you would consider to be kind of left-wing are looking at this and going, it's one thing to be supportive of unions. It's another thing to create a situation that's totally unsustainable.
Now, who do we blame, the unions or politicians who didn't negotiate hard enough on behalf of the taxpayer?
Well, I think you have to blame the politicians. I mean, they're your elected representatives. They're the ones who have the onus of acting on residents' best interest. And, you know, quite frankly, when they're more interested in getting reelected, you know, some other things fall to the wayside. During this election campaign, you know, my campaign manager, I thought it was kind of funny. We got at least 3 or 4 hugely detailed questionnaires, policy statements, things like this. They were all from union-based organizations, and basically trying to get commitments that you know, you were going to support them, you were going to support their endeavors. You know, I'm very supportive of our emergency services. I think that they've got a terribly tough job to do, but you know, when your rank and file officers, your rank and file firefighters are making over $100,000 a year, the system just can't afford that. It doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, it's interesting that union organizations would send you these questionnaires to try and get you on board with them in view of one of the things said by Dave Wakely, president of OPSU, and I'll tell you what I mean in just a moment. It's 11:15. Depth Radio, News Talk 1010. I'm Jerry Agar. I'm with John Armstrong. He is a candidate in Mississauga Ward 2. He made the statement the other day during a debate that the unionized workers, people who are frontline emergency workers in Peel Region, make too much money. I want to emphasize again that we invited Dave Wakely, president of OPSU Local 277, representing the region's 550 paramedics, on the show, and he declined. It's not we couldn't get a hold of him. He declined. Now, you tell me, John Armstrong, that you as a candidate were contacted by various unions with long questionnaires seeing whether or not you would get on board with their needs, desires, their agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
All right, but then when you said something they didn't like, Dave Wakely said, Mr. Armstrong and his uninformed Tea Party ideology have no place in the delivery of care to the sick and injured, and no place in the region of Peel. You, sir, should shut the hell up. He did. Yeah, I said that last part. I threw that in.
No, that is pretty much what he said. And you know, I have not, I've never met Dave Wakely. I've never talked to Dave Wakely. I was kind of surprised on the position that he was taking. I could see him, you know, disagreeing with my statements. But to say that the statements had no place in Peel Region, you know, if an elected council, which is essentially, you know, your board of directors for a city, has the responsibility and the fiscal responsibility of running that city, and one of its components is your emergency service workers and your paramedics. How could that not be appropriate in this forum? I mean, it's the exact place where you deal with these kind of things.
Well, it's not just that you are running for office, or might be that a politician has no place. We all have a place in that discussion. And not everyone's going to agree. It's certainly debatable as to whether or not public employees, emergency employees earn just the right amount, too much, too little. That is a debatable thing. But to say that anybody, politician or taxpayer, has no place in the debate is just arrogant narcissism, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it does reflect a sense of entitlement, and you know that's what we've created, and we're going to have to take steps to deal with it.
All right, I'm with John Armstrong, who is a Mississauga Ward 2 candidate. Here is Steve from Mississauga.
Hi, John. I live in Mississauga, and I'm just curious exactly what person made that remark and what planet were they from along the light side of it. I'd really be curious, because if they weren't appreciative of the fact that that's where things get decided, maybe they shouldn't be doing their job.
Well, it's Dave Wakely, as the president of the union. It is his job to get the best deal he can for his people. You can't begrudge him that. But to say politicians don't have a place in the debate is ridiculous. Now, what was your question for Mr. Armstrong?
My question is, what's been the trajectory of their increases? Like, what are they increasing, or what kind of a tangent are they on? And is it anywhere near what the level of the economy's been at, or the realistic equation to the average person's wages?
Yeah, you know what? I don't have specific information on that, and because we're talking about really several different types of positions, and it'd be kind of hard to get a hold of that. What had started me on this was actually something from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario that was released on the 16th of August, where their executive director had made the statement. So that's basically what I'm going on. All I know that is is that in the industry that I was working into up until recently, if anything, earnings have been flat or down, and that's even comparing it over a 10-year period. I'm certainly sure that that's not the case with the unionized positions.
John Armstrong, Mississauga Ward 2 candidate, thanks for your time.
No problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Good to have you. So how do you come down on this? Again, here's what I want to emphasize. It's debatable whether or not emergency workers in any region are being paid what they are worth, what they deserve, whether it's too much, it's too little, it's just right. But to me, it is not debatable